They saw her organizing birthday parties and handling employee complaints. What they didn't see was the woman who had once led classified operations in hostile territory, whose tactical mind was analyzing every security weakness in their corporate tower while she smiled and asked about their weekend plans. Megan Gray had traded her combat boots for sensible flats, her tactical gear for blazers and ID lanyards. But some skills never fade, and some instincts never sleep. When danger finally came to Mason Financial Group, they would discover that the quiet HR manager they dismissed as a policy-pushing paper shuffler was the only thing standing between survival and catastrophe. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Megan Gray moved through the 32nd floor of Mason Financial Group like water, flowing around stones present but unnoticed, necessary but rarely acknowledged. Her charcoal blazer was perfectly pressed, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun that never drew attention, and her smile was the kind of pleasant, neutral expression that people forgot the moment they looked away. The badge clipped to her lapel read Human Resources Manager in corporate blue letters, though most employees simply saw it as a warning label. Proceed with caution, HR. Present. The morning routine was as predictable as sunrise. Coffee from the break room, black, no sugar. A habit that raised eyebrows among colleagues who expected someone in HR to order complicated lattes. Check emails filled with vacation requests, policy questions, and the occasional complaint about office temperature or parking spaces. Review schedules for employee training sessions that most people attended with the enthusiasm of dental patients. Navigate the endless stream of interruptions from staff who needed forms signed, policies clarified, or someone to listen to their frustrations about everything from printer malfunctions to perceived workplace injustices. Megan, do you have a minute? The voice belonged to Jennifer Chun, a marketing coordinator whose perpetually stressed expression had become her trademark. Jennifer appeared in the doorway of Megan's modest office, clutching a stack of papers like a lifeline. Of course, Jennifer. What can I help you with today? Megan's voice carried the practiced warmth of someone who had perfected the art of appearing approachable while maintaining professional boundaries. It's this harassment complaint form. I'm not sure if what happened in the break room yesterday actually qualifies as harassment, or if it's just Jason being his usual inappropriate self. Jennifer's voice dropped to a whisper, as if discussing state secrets rather than office gossip. Megan gestured to the chair across from her desk, automatically assessing Jennifer's body language, stress indicators, and potential credibility habits, ingrained from years of evaluating intelligence sources under pressure. But her response was measured, professional. Tell me exactly what happened, step by step. Don't worry about whether it meets any specific definition. Just focus on the facts. As Jennifer recounted her story about Jason Miller's inappropriate comments and unwanted attention, Megan listened with the kind of focused attention that most people reserve for emergency situations. But this wasn't emergency-level focus for her. This was simply how she processed information. Every detail was cataloged, inconsistencies noted, patterns identified. While Jennifer saw someone sympathetically nodding and taking notes, Megan was constructing a complete tactical assessment of the situation. I'll look into this immediately, Megan assured her after Jennifer finished. In the meantime, document any future interactions with Jason, time, location, witnesses if any, and Jennifer? She waited until the younger woman met her eyes. You did the right thing by coming forward. After Jennifer left, Megan pulled up Jason Miller's employee file on her computer. Third complaint this year, all involving inappropriate behavior toward female colleagues. Previous incidents had been handled with warnings and mandatory sensitivity training, corporate solutions that addressed symptoms rather than problems. Megan's fingers drummed silently on her desk as she reviewed the pattern, her mind automatically shifting into threat assessment mode. The irony wasn't lost on her. In her previous life, she would have handled someone like Jason Miller with swift, decisive action. A quiet conversation in a secure location, clear parameters established, consequences made unmistakably clear. But corporate America operated under different rules, with different weapons. Instead of direct confrontation, she would use documentation, policy enforcement, and careful bureaucratic maneuvering to neutralize the threat Jason posed to workplace safety. "Hey Megan, got a second?" David Torres, the IT security manager, appeared in her doorway. Unlike most employees who approached HR with visible reluctance, David seemed genuinely comfortable around her. Maybe because he understood that both their jobs involved protecting the company from different types of threats. "Always have time for IT security," Megan replied, noting David's unusually serious expression. "What's on your mind?" David closed her office door behind him, a gesture that immediately elevated Megan's attention level, though her expression remained casually interested. "I've been reviewing our building access logs as part of the quarterly security audit. Some patterns that don't quite add up." Megan leaned forward slightly, a movement so subtle it appeared casual rather than tactical. "What kind of patterns?" "Badge entries that don't match employee schedules. People accessing floors they don't normally work on. A few instances of badges being used after hours by people who claim they weren't in the building." David pulled out a tablet showing access data spreadsheets. Individually, each incident has a reasonable explanation. But taken together, they suggest systematic security breaches, Megan finished, her mind already processing the implications. "Have you reported this to management?" David's expression darkened. "That's where it gets interesting. I brought my concerns to Robert Walsh, our head of security. He basically told me I was being paranoid, that the patterns were probably just normal variations in employee behavior. Said he'd look into it, but that was 3 weeks ago." Megan felt a familiar chill run down her spine, the same instinctive warning that had kept her alive during classified operations in unstable regions. When security concerns were dismissed rather than investigated, it usually meant one of two things: incompetence or complicity. Neither option was reassuring. "David, I'm going to ask you to do something that might seem unusual for an HR request," she said carefully. "I want you to compile a complete report on these access anomalies. Include everything: timestamps, badge numbers, floor access patterns, everything you've found. But don't distribute it through normal channels yet. You think there's something serious going on here?" David's voice carried a note of validation, the relief of someone whose concerns were finally being taken seriously. "I think when security professionals raise concerns, those concerns deserve thorough investigation rather than dismissal," Megan replied diplomatically. "And I think HR has a responsibility to ensure employee safety, which includes physical security." David nodded, understanding the subtext. "I'll have that report ready by tomorrow morning. Should I bring it directly to me?" "No emails, no shared drives, hard copy only." Megan's tone was still conversational, but David caught the underlying seriousness. After David left, Megan sat quietly in her office, processing the conversation. In her corporate role, she was expected to handle employee relations, policy compliance, and administrative tasks that kept the business running smoothly. But her training had taught her to recognize patterns that others missed, to identify threats before they became crises, and to trust instincts that had been honed through years of high-stakes decision-making. The afternoon brought its usual parade of routine HR tasks. A new employee orientation where she explained benefits packages and workplace policies to a group of recent college graduates who looked overwhelmed by the complexity of corporate life. A meeting with the facilities team about updating the emergency evacuation procedures, a discussion that most participants approached as a bureaucratic requirement, but which Megan treated as genuine crisis preparation. A performance review session with a struggling analyst whose defensive attitude suggested deeper workplace issues that wouldn't be resolved through standard HR interventions. Each interaction was handled with professional competence that masked years of training in reading people, assessing threats, and maintaining operational security. When she explained evacuation procedures, she was simultaneously noting exit routes, identifying potential choke points, and evaluating the building's vulnerability to various threat scenarios. When she reviewed employee performance issues, she was analyzing behavioral patterns that might indicate security risks, personal problems that could be exploited by hostile actors, or signs of potential workplace violence. But to her colleagues, she was simply Megan from HR, reliable, professional, and safely predictable. Someone who could be counted on to handle the messy, human elements of corporate life while more important people focused on more important business. Day's final challenge came in the form of Marcus Webb, the company's chief financial officer, who rarely ventured into HR territory unless absolutely necessary. His appearance in her office doorway at 5:30 p.m. suggested either a crisis or an attempt to discuss sensitive matters when fewer people were around to overhear. "Megan, I need to discuss a delicate personnel matter," Webb began, his tone carrying the kind of forced casualness that usually preceded requests for questionable actions. "Of course, Marcus. Please have a seat." Megan gestured to the chair Jennifer had occupied that morning, her mind already preparing for whatever ethical minefield was about to be presented. "It's about David Torres in IT security. I understand. He's been raising concerns about building access patterns, suggesting potential security breaches." Webb's carefully neutral expression told Megan everything she needed to know about his real purpose. "David brought some data anomalies to my attention, yes. Standard due diligence for someone in his position." Megan's response was equally neutral, giving nothing away while gathering information. "The thing is, David's been under a lot of stress lately. Personal issues, performance concerns. I'm worried that his judgment might be compromised, that he's seeing problems where none exist." Webb leaned forward slightly, his tone becoming more confidential. "I think it might be best if we quietly transferred him to a different department, somewhere with less security-sensitive responsibilities." Every instinct Megan had developed over years of operational experience screamed warning. Webb was trying to remove the one person who had identified potential security threats, using HR as a weapon to silence legitimate concerns. In her previous life, this kind of behavior would have triggered immediate investigation and protective measures for the threatened individual. "That's a significant step, Marcus. What specific performance issues are you referring to?" "I don't have any documented concerns about David's work quality in his file." Webb's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes performance issues are subtle, Megan. Sometimes they're more about fit than about technical competence. I'm sure you understand." Megan understood perfectly. Webb was testing whether she would be a compliant tool for suppressing security concerns or whether she would insist on following proper procedures. Her response would determine not only David's future but also her own standing in whatever was happening at Mason Financial Group. "I understand the importance of ensuring our employees are in positions where they can be most effective," she said. "Carefully. Any personnel decisions of that magnitude would need to be properly documented and justified through our standard review processes." Webb's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. I just wanted to give you a heads up about potential issues. We'll discuss this further after you've had time to review David's situation." After Webb left, Megan sat in her quiet office as the building emptied around her. The corporate tower that housed Mason Financial Group was transforming from a bustling center of business activity into something more isolated, more vulnerable. Through her window, she could see the lights of other office buildings stretching across the city, each one representing thousands of people going about their normal routines, unaware of potential threats lurking in the shadows. she pulled out her secure personal phone, a device that looked identical to a standard smartphone, but contained capabilities that most corporate HR managers would never need. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, sending a carefully worded message to contacts who operated in worlds far removed from employee handbooks and performance reviews. The message was simple: potential security situation. Developing. May need consultation on threat assessment. Will advise. The response came within minutes. Standing by. Assets available if needed. Megan deleted both messages, the words disappearing as if they had never existed. To anyone observing her, she was simply finishing her workday, gathering her purse and preparing to head home like any other professional. But beneath the surface, she was already shifting into a different mode of operation, one that her colleagues couldn't imagine and wouldn't understand until circumstances forced them to dot as she locked her office and walked toward the elevator. Megan Gray appeared to be exactly what everyone believed her to be: a competent but unremarkable HR manager heading home after another routine day of corporate life. But appearances could be deceiving, and some people were much more than they seemed. The quiet woman in the sensible blazer who smiled pleasantly and asked about weekend plans was also someone who had once moved through hostile territory with lethal precision, who had made life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure, and who had never forgotten that the most dangerous threats were often the ones that looked perfectly normal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and new tests of whether the skills that had once made her invaluable in classified operations could be adapted to protect people who had no idea they might need protection. But tonight, Megan Gray went home to her modest apartment, where she maintained equipment that no HR manager should possess and reviewed intelligence sources that no corporate employee should access. The transformation was already beginning, even if no one else realized it yet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning arrived with Chicago's typical autumn chill, but Megan Gray was already at her desk by 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before most Mason Financial employees would begin trickling in. The early arrival wasn't unusual. For her, she'd maintained military precision in her schedule long after leaving classified operations. What was unusual was the manila envelope David Torres had slipped under her office door sometime during the night. Inside were 43 pages of meticulously documented security anomalies, each entry timestamped and cross-referenced with employee schedules. David's analysis was thorough, methodical, and deeply troubling. Badge access patterns showed a systematic infiltration of the building's security protocols that went far beyond random policy violations or employee carelessness. Megan spread the documents across her desk, her trained eye immediately recognizing the tactical sophistication of what David had uncovered. Someone with advanced knowledge of corporate security systems was using Mason Financial Group's own employees as unwitting cover for unauthorized access. Badge cloning, schedule manipulation, and coordinated entry patterns suggested professional-level surveillance and intelligence gathering. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message: "Package received. Analysis confirms your concerns. Recommend immediate protective measures." The message was from Sarah Mitchell, a former teammate who now worked private security for high-value corporate clients. Megan had forwarded David's findings through secure channels the previous evening, seeking confirmation that her instincts weren't being influenced by her transition to civilian life. Sarah's response validated her worst fears. "Megan?" Jennifer Chun's voice interrupted her analysis. The marketing coordinator stood in the doorway looking even more stressed than usual, clutching a coffee cup like a security blanket. Megan quickly gathered David's documents and slipped them into a locked drawer. "Morning, Jennifer. You're in early today. Couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about what we discussed yesterday, about Jason Miller." Jennifer stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. Something else happened last night. Megan's attention sharpened. What kind of something? I was working late on the Morrison campaign presentation, probably around 9 p.m. Most of the floor was empty, but I heard voices coming from the conference room near Jason's office. I thought maybe he was in a client call, but when I walked past, Jennifer paused, gathering her courage. He was showing someone around the office, someone who definitely doesn't work here. Can you describe this person? Middle-aged man, expensive suit, but something about him felt wrong, like he was studying everything too carefully, asking too many questions about who worked where and when. Jennifer's voice dropped, and Jason was acting strange, nervous, like he was being forced to do something he didn't want to do. Megan felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to align. Jason Miller's inappropriate behavior toward female employees could be cover for something much more serious, or someone could be using his vulnerabilities as leverage for unauthorized access to the building and its personnel. Jennifer, I need you to do something important. Document everything you remember about last night, exact times, physical descriptions, what you overheard. But don't discuss this with anyone else yet, not even your closest colleagues. You think something serious is happening, don't you? Jennifer's intuition was sharper than most people gave her credit for. I think we need to be very careful about protecting both you and other employees until we understand what's going on, Megan replied. Diplomatically, can you do that for me? After Jennifer left, Megan reviewed David's security data with new understanding. The unauthorized access patterns weren't random. They were deliberately targeting employees with access to specific information or areas of the building. Jason Miller's office was located near the executive conference rooms, where sensitive financial discussions took place. Someone was using him to gather intelligence on Mason Financial Group's operations, clients, and vulnerabilities. Her desk phone rang with an internal call. Megan, this is Robert Walsh from security. I understand David Torres has been bothering you with conspiracy theories about our access systems. Robert Walsh, the head of security, who had dismissed David's concerns without investigation. Megan had never worked directly with Walsh, but his timing suggested he was monitoring who had access to David's findings. David brought some data irregularities to my attention as part of standard employee relations, Megan replied carefully. Nothing that couldn't be explained by normal workplace variations. Good. I'm glad you're taking a sensible approach. David's been under stress lately, seeing patterns that aren't really there. I'd hate for him to cause unnecessary alarm among other employees. Walsh's tone carried a subtle threat wrapped in corporate politeness. Of course, employee well-being is always my primary concern. I'm sure it is. By the way, Marcus Webb mentioned, you might be reviewing David's performance and placement within the company. If you need any input from the security perspective, I'm happy to provide documentation. The coordination between Walsh and Webb was now obvious. They were working together to neutralize David's investigation, using HR processes as a weapon against the one person who had identified their security vulnerabilities. The question was whether they were simply incompetent managers trying to cover their failures, or active participants in whatever was happening at Mason Financial Group. I appreciate the offer, Robert. I'll let you know if I need additional input on David's situation. After ending the call, Megan made a decision that would have been impossible for a normal HR manager but was second nature for someone with her background. She activated a small recording device that looked identical to a standard office supply pen, then walked to David Torres's IT security office on the 28th floor. David looked up from his computer screens as she approached, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Did you review the access data I provided? I did. Your analysis was extremely thorough. Megan closed his office door and activated a white noise app on her phone. Standard Counter-surveillance technique disguised as privacy protection. David, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need you to trust me with honest answers. Okay. David's cybersecurity background had given him enough exposure to corporate espionage concerns that he understood the serious tone. How long have you been documenting these access anomalies? About 6 weeks. I started noticing patterns during routine maintenance on the badge readers, then began systematic analysis when the patterns didn't make sense. Who else have you discussed this with besides Robert Walsh and myself? No one. Walsh specifically told me to keep my concerns confidential while he investigated. David's expression darkened, which apparently meant doing nothing while telling everyone I was being paranoid. David, I'm going to share something with you that might sound unusual coming from HR. Megan leaned forward, her voice carrying authority that hadn't been there. During their previous conversation, I believe your security concerns are legitimate and potentially serious. I also believe there are people within this company who don't want those concerns investigated. David's eyes widened. You think Walsh is involved in whatever's happening? I think we need to be very careful about who we trust and how we proceed. Your technical analysis is solid, but we need more information before we can determine the scope of what we're dealing with. Megan pulled out a secure smartphone, not her normal corporate device, but the encrypted unit she'd used the previous evening. I'm going to give you a secure communication method. If you notice any retaliation, unusual pressure, or escalation of the security issues you've identified, contact me immediately. David stared at the military-grade device. Megan, what exactly is your background? Because this doesn't feel like standard HR protocol. My background is protecting people when systems fail and threats emerge, she replied honestly. Right now, I think Mason Financial Group's employees may need that kind of protection. The afternoon brought an unexpected development in the form of Lisa Rodriguez, the company's chief legal counsel, appearing in Megan's office with the kind of grim expression that usually preceded lawsuits or regulatory investigations. Megan, we need to discuss a sensitive matter regarding employee surveillance and privacy rights. Lisa began, settling into the chair across from Megan's desk. What kind of surveillance concerns? I've received reports that IT personnel have been conducting unauthorized analysis of employee access patterns, potentially violating privacy policies and creating liability exposure for the company. Lisa's careful legal language couldn't hide her obvious discomfort with the situation. Megan realized that David's investigation was being systematically dismantled through multiple CORPORAT channels. Someone with significant influence was orchestrating a campaign to silence security concerns and remove threats to whatever operation was unfolding within Mason Financial Group. These would be serious allegations if substantiated, Megan replied diplomatically. What specific policies are we concerned about? The primary concern is unauthorized data analysis that could be construed as employee monitoring without proper consent or justification. I'm told that David Torres in IT security has been collecting and analyzing personal movement data for multiple employees without management authorization. The irony was stunning. David's legitimate security analysis was being reframed as a privacy violation, while the actual security threats he'd identified were being ignored. Lisa Rodriguez was an honest lawyer being used as an unwitting weapon against the investigation that could protect the company. Lisa, I need to ask you something directly. Who specifically brought these concerns to your attention? Robert Walsh and Marcus Webb. They're recommending immediate disciplinary action against David Torres, possibly termination for cause. Lisa's expression suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the recommendation. Before we proceed with any disciplinary measures, I'd like to review the specific data analysis and determine whether it falls under legitimate security protocols or unauthorized surveillance, Megan said carefully. That's reasonable. But Megan, there's pressure to resolve this quickly. Webb is concerned about potential legal exposure if word gets out that we've been monitoring employee movements. After Lisa left, Megan sat quietly in her office, processing the escalating campaign against David's investigation. In less than 24 hours, multiple departments had been mobilized to neutralize the security concerns he'd raised. The coordination suggested either high-level corporate conspiracy or external pressure that reached into the company's leadership structure. Her secure phone buzzed with another encrypted message. Confirmed professional surveillance operation. Corporate infiltration. Likely. Recommend immediate extraction protocols for key personnel. Sarah Mitchell's assessment aligned with Megan's growing concerns. Whatever was happening at Mason Financial Group was sophisticated, well-resourced, and potentially dangerous for anyone who got too close to the truth. The time for corporate protocols and bureaucratic solutions was rapidly ending. Megan locked David's security analysis in her office safe alongside other sensitive materials, then began making discreet inquiries about emergency procedures and evacuation protocols. To anyone observing, she was simply reviewing standard HR policies. But she was actually preparing for the possibility that Mason Financial Group's comfortable corporate environment was about to become something much more dangerous. The transformation was accelerating, even if no one else realized it yet. The quiet HR manager who handled employee complaints and policy questions was shifting into operational mode, preparing to protect people who had no idea they might need protection from threats they couldn't imagine. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new pressures, and new tests of whether her skills could be adapted to a battlefield that looked like a corporate office tower, but might be just as lethal as any overseas operation she'd survived. The emergency meeting was called for 2 p.m. on Thursday, less than 48 hours after David Torres had delivered his security analysis to Megan. The conference room on the 35th floor was Mason Financial Group's most secure meeting space, typically reserved for merger discussions and confidential client presentations. Today, it would serve as the stage for David's professional execution. Megan arrived early, positioning herself where she could observe all participants while maintaining the appearance of standard HR support. Marcus Webb sat at the head of the polished conference table, flanked by Robert Walsh and Lisa Rodriguez. David entered precisely at 2 p.m., carrying a single folder and wearing the expression of someone who knew he was walking into an ambush but had no choice but to proceed. "David, thank you for joining us," Webb began with false warmth. "We've asked Megan to sit in as HR representative, since this discussion involves potential policy violations and performance concerns." David glanced at Megan, searching for some sign of support or guidance. She maintained professional neutrality, but her slight nod conveyed understanding. She was there as his advocate, not his prosecutor. "David, we've become aware that you've been conducting unauthorized surveillance of employee access patterns," Walsh continued, his tone carrying bureaucratic authority. "This represents a serious violation of privacy policies and potentially creates legal liability for the company." "I was conducting routine security analysis within my job responsibilities," David replied carefully. "The anomalies I identified represent potential security breaches that require investigation." "Lisa." Rodriguez consulted her notes with obvious reluctance. "David, the issue isn't your intention, but your methodology. Analyzing employee movement patterns without specific authorization and without privacy safeguards violates several company policies." Megan watched the careful choreography of institutional pressure. Each participant was playing their assigned role in a script designed to eliminate David's investigation while appearing to follow proper procedures. But she also noticed subtle signs that not everyone was comfortable with their role. "What specific privacy policies am I alleged to have violated?" David asked, his IT background giving him enough legal knowledge to challenge vague accusations. Webb leaned forward, assuming control of the conversation. David, I think we're getting bogged down in technical details. The bigger picture is that your recent behavior suggests you're experiencing stress that's affecting your judgment. The company wants to support you through this difficult period. The pivot to personal rather than professional criticism was a classic intimidation technique. Instead of addressing David's security findings, they were reframing him as mentally unstable, a characterization that would discredit any future warnings he might raise. My judgment is sound, and my analysis is accurate, David replied firmly. The security anomalies I've identified represent genuine threats to company operations and employee safety. David, Megan interjected carefully, would you be willing to walk us through your specific findings? I think it would help everyone understand the scope and nature of your concerns. Webb's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. He clearly hadn't expected HR to request detailed review of the security analysis he was trying to suppress. David opened his folder and began presenting the same data he'd provided to Megan, but now in front of the people who were working to silence him. Badge access patterns show systematic infiltration over the past 8 weeks. Multiple employees are being used as cover for unauthorized personnel to access restricted areas during off hours. As David explained his findings, Megan watched the reactions around the table. Lisa Rodriguez appeared genuinely surprised by the technical sophistication of the analysis. Walsh maintained studied disinterest, occasionally checking his phone as if the security briefing was routine bureaucracy. But Webb's reaction was the most telling. His questions were too specific, too focused on operational details that someone uninvolved shouldn't care about. David, these patterns you're describing, Webb interrupted. How exactly would someone external to the company orchestrate this kind of systematic access? It was the wrong question for someone who should be focused on whether the threats were real rather than how they might be executed. Webb's inquiry revealed knowledge of covert operational planning that went far beyond normal corporate executive experience. That's exactly what needs to be investigated, David replied. Someone with detailed knowledge of our security protocols and employee schedules is coordinating unauthorized access. The sophistication suggests professional-level intelligence gathering, or it suggests data analysis errors and coincidental patterns that appear meaningful when viewed through a paranoid lens. Walsh countered DISEMISSIV ESLY. Megan made a decision that would have been impossible for a normal HR manager, but was automatic for someone with her operational background. I'd like to suggest a compromise approach. Let's have an independent security consultant review David's findings to determine their validity. If the analysis is flawed, we address David's performance issues. If the analysis is accurate, we implement immediate protective measures. The suggestion created an unexpected problem for Webb and Walsh. Rejecting independent verification would appear unreasonable, but allowing external review would expose whatever they were trying to hide. That's an interesting suggestion, Webb said slowly. But I'm concerned about involving outsiders in our internal security matters. Confidentiality issues, potential information leaks. I understand the confidentiality concerns, Megan replied smoothly. I actually know a security consultant with appropriate clearances and corporate experience. Someone who could review the technical analysis without creating additional exposure. She was thinking of Sarah Mitchell, whose private security firm specialized in exactly this type of corporate threat assessment. But the suggestion also served as a test. If Webb and Walsh were willing to allow genuine independent review, they might be incompetent rather than complicit. If they rejected reasonable verification measures, their motivations became clear. Lisa Rodriguez seized on the compromise. That sounds like a prudent approach. External verification would protect both David's concerns and the company's interests. Webb was trapped between appearing reasonable and preventing exposure of whatever operation was unfolding. Let me think about the best way to structure that kind of review. In the meantime, I think we should place David on administrative leave pending resolution of the privacy policy concerns. Administrative leave seems premature, Megan said carefully. If we're committed to independent verification of his findings, why not wait for those results before taking disciplinary action? The tension in the room was becoming palpable. Webb clearly wanted David removed immediately, while Megan was creating procedural obstacles that appeared reasonable, but delayed his objectives. I think administrative leave is appropriate, given the serious nature of the policy violations. Walsh supported Webb's position. We can't have employees conducting unauthorized surveillance while we investigate their claims. David finally spoke up, his voice carrying frustration and growing realization. You're not investigating my claims. You're trying to silence them. Everything I've presented shows systematic security compromises, and your response is to remove me from my position rather than address the threats I've identified. The direct confrontation forced everyone to choose sides. Lisa Rodriguez looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Walsh and Webb exchanged glances that suggested coordinated strategy. Megan maintained professional neutrality while mentally preparing for whatever would come next. David, I understand your frustration, Webb said with false sympathy. But your recent behavior suggests you're under significant stress. The company has an obligation to ensure employee well-being, which sometimes means stepping back from situations that might be contributing to that stress. It was a masterful manipulation, reframing legitimate security concerns as symptoms of mental instability, creating grounds for removing David while appearing to act in his best interests. Megan realized the meeting was reaching a critical point. Webb and Walsh were prepared to eliminate David's investigation through whatever means necessary, regardless of the security implications. Her next statement would determine whether she maintained her cover as a compliant HR manager or revealed capabilities that would escalate the situation dramatically. I'd like to propose a modified approach, she said calmly. Let's place David on paid administrative leave pending independent security review, but maintain his access to company communications in case the external consultant needs clarification on his analysis. It was a compromise that appeared reasonable, while actually preserving David's ability to monitor ongoing security threats and maintain contact with Megan through secure channels. Webb's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I don't think that's necessary. If David's claims are legitimate, his documentation should be sufficient for external review. Of course, Megan agreed pleasantly. I'm just thinking about thorough due diligence. If there are genuine security threats, we want to ensure the consultant has all necessary resources to identify and address them. The meeting concluded with David placed on immediate administrative leave, his access credentials suspended, and promises of independent review that everyone except Lisa Rodriguez understood would never occur. As participants filed out, Megan caught David's eye and made a subtle gesture toward her secure phone, a reminder that he had alternative communication methods that couldn't be monitored through corporate systems. After everyone left, Megan remained in the conference room, ostensibly reviewing her notes but actually processing the tactical situation. Webb and Walsh had revealed enough operational knowledge to confirm they were actively involved in whatever threats David had identified. Lisa Rodriguez was an unwitting participant being used to provide legal cover for questionable actions. And David Torres was now a target for elimination, professionally and potentially personally. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Package confirmed compromised. Multiple hostile actors identified. Recommend immediate protective protocols for primary asset. Sarah Mitchell's intelligence network had been monitoring the situation independently, and their assessment aligned with Megan's growing concerns. Mason Financial Group was no longer simply a corporate environment with security issues. It was an active operational theater where her colleagues were potential targets of professional adversaries. The time for corporate solutions and bureaucratic procedures was ending. The quiet HR manager who had spent 2 days navigating employee complaints and policy discussions was preparing to transition into a very different role. But the transition would have to be careful, measured, and invisible to the people who believed they were manipulating a predictable corporate employee. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and new tests of whether someone could protect innocent people without revealing capabilities that would transform her from an overlooked ally into a primary target. The game was changing, but most of the players didn't understand the new rules yet. Megan Gray gathered her materials and headed back to her office, where she would begin preparing for operations that no HR manual had ever covered. Friday morning arrived with David Torres absent from his IT security office for the first time in 3 years. His access badge had been deactivated at 5:17 p.m. the previous evening, his email account locked, and his security clearances suspended pending administrative review. To most Mason Financial employees, David had simply disappeared into the corporate bureaucracy that occasionally swallowed troublesome personnel without explanation. But Megan Gray knew better. At 6:45 a.m., she received an encrypted message on her secure device. Package has been isolated. Secondary sweep in progress. Recommend enhanced countermeasures. David was still free and communicating, but whoever had orchestrated his removal was now conducting systematic elimination of his investigative work. Computer files were being deleted, physical documents relocated to secure storage, and anyone who had interacted with David's security analysis was being quietly monitored and assessed. Megan's first official task of the day was a meeting with Jennifer Chun, who had requested urgent consultation about workplace safety concerns. Jennifer arrived at Megan's office at 8:30 a.m., but instead of her usual scattered anxiety, she displayed the focused intensity of someone who had witnessed something genuinely frightening. "Megan, I need to tell you about last night," Jennifer began, closing the office door and speaking in barely audible tones. "I worked late again, trying to finish the Morrison presentation. Around 10 p.m., I heard voices in the conference room where I saw Jason with that stranger earlier this week." "The same conference room?" Megan asked, already knowing the answer. "Would complicate an already dangerous situation." "Yes, but this time there were more people. At least 4 voices, maybe 5. And they weren't speaking English." Jennifer's hands trembled slightly as she continued. "I know some Russian from college. Linguistics courses. They were discussing extraction timelines and asset security in what sounded like professional military terminology." Megan felt ice form in her stomach. Foreign operatives conducting planning sessions inside Mason Financial Group represented a threat level that went far beyond corporate espionage. If Jennifer's translation was accurate, they were preparing for some kind of extraction operation, possibly targeting sensitive financial data, key personnel, or both. "Jennifer, this is extremely important. Did they see you? Do you think they know you overheard their conversation?" "I don't think so. I stayed in my office with the lights off until they left around 11:30. But Megan... Jennifer paused, gathering courage for what came next. "When I finally left the building, there was a van parked across the street that hadn't been there earlier. Same van was there when I arrived this morning. Professional surveillance." Jennifer Chun, a marketing coordinator whose biggest previous workplace concern had been inappropriate comments from Jason Miller, was now being monitored by hostile foreign operatives because she had inadvertently discovered their planning session. Megan made a decision that transformed her from corporate HR manager to protective operative. "Jennifer, I'm going to ask you to do several things that might seem unusual, but I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" "Yes." Jennifer's response was immediate, driven by instincts that recognized genuine authority, even when it came from an unexpected source. "First, you're going to call in sick today and for the rest of the week. Family emergency, something that keeps you away from the office and requires minimal contact with colleagues. Megan pulled a secure smartphone from her desk drawer. Second, you're going to take this phone and follow the instructions I'm about to give you for staying safe until this situation is resolved. Jennifer stared at the military-grade device. Megan, what exactly is happening here? And how do you know about secure communications and surveillance countermeasures? What's happening is that Mason Financial Group has been infiltrated by hostile operatives who are conducting intelligence gathering and planning extraction operations. Megan replied with matter-of-fact precision. As for my background, let's just say that HR wasn't my first career, and some skills transfer between very different types of operations. The partial revelation was calculated to provide Jennifer with enough information to follow instructions, without overwhelming her with details that might compromise operational security. Jennifer's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization that the quiet HR manager she'd known for 2 years was someone entirely different. Are you some kind of federal agent? Jennifer asked quietly. I'm someone with experience protecting people when conventional systems fail, Megan replied diplomatically. Right now, that's what matters most. After Jennifer left through a service exit, with detailed instructions for maintaining personal security, Megan activated protocols she hadn't used since leaving classified operations. Her office computer was isolated from the corporate network through techniques that appeared like routine maintenance, but actually prevented remote monitoring. Her personal communications were rerouted through encrypted channels that couldn't be intercepted by standard corporate surveillance. And her daily schedule was modified to include meetings that were actually reconnaissance and counter-surveillance activities. At 11 a.m., Marcus Webb appeared in her doorway without appointment or announcement, a breach of normal corporate etiquette that suggested increasing urgency in whatever operation was unfolding. Megan, I wanted to follow up on yesterday's discussion about David Torres. I trust his administrative leave is proceeding smoothly? As smoothly as these situations ever proceed, Megan replied neutrally. Is there a specific concern? Webb entered her office and closed the door, a gesture that would have seemed normal for sensitive HR discussions but now carried implications of threat assessment and information security. The concern is ensuring that David's conspiracy theories don't spread to other employees and create unnecessary panic. I haven't detected any panic among the staff, Megan said carefully. Most people seem to view David's situation as standard administrative processing. Good. But I'm wondering if anyone else might have been exposed to his security analysis before we intervened. Webb's question was casual, but his body language suggested focused intelligence gathering. Megan recognized the probe for what it was, an attempt to identify and neutralize anyone who might have information about the security breaches David had discovered. The timing suggested that Webb's associates had noticed Jennifer's absence and were trying to determine what she might know. David was always very professional about maintaining confidentiality on security matters, Megan replied. I believe his analysis was kept within appropriate channels. Webb nodded, but his expression suggested the answer wasn't entirely satisfactory. Still, if you become aware of any employees expressing concerns about building security or asking questions about access protocols, I'd appreciate immediate notification. Of course, employee concerns should always be addressed promptly. Megan's agreement was professional and meaningless, a bureaucratic response that committed her to nothing while appearing cooperative. After Webb left, Megan received another encrypted message. Primary target has been identified for immediate extraction. Secondary threats require neutralization. Timeline accelerated. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. David Torres was in immediate danger. Jennifer Chun was under surveillance, and Megan herself was likely being evaluated as either a useful tool or a potential threat. The foreign operatives Webb was working with had moved from intelligence gathering to active operations. Megan activated her emergency communication protocol, sending a carefully coded message that would appear to casual observation like a routine business email but would alert her former teammates to prepare immediate support assets. The message referenced a consulting contract that required specialized expertise and expedited delivery, language that translated to a request for backup, tactical support, and extraction capabilities. The response came within 30 minutes. Consulting team mobilizing, specialized equipment available. Delivery scheduled for 1800 hours. Sarah Mitchell's private security firm was deploying assets to Chicago, but they wouldn't arrive until 6 p.m. Megan had approximately 7 hours to protect David and Jennifer while maintaining her cover as a corporate HR manager who had no idea that her workplace had become an active operational theater. At 2 p.m., Robert Walsh appeared in her office with the kind of urgent expression that usually preceded either genuine emergencies or carefully orchestrated crises. "Megan, we have a situation. Jennifer Chun hasn't reported to work today, and she's not responding to calls or emails from her supervisor." "She called in sick this morning," Megan replied smoothly. "Family emergency, if I recall correctly." "What kind of family emergency?" Walsh's question was too specific, too focused for someone who should be concerned about general employee welfare rather than detailed personal information. "I don't typically pry into personal medical or family details unless employees specifically request support services," Megan said professionally. "Privacy considerations, you understand." Walsh's expression hardened slightly. "Given the sensitive security concerns we've been dealing with, I think we need to be more attentive. 2. Unusual employee behavior. Jennifer's sudden absence, combined with her proximity to David Torres's work area, creates potential security implications. The threat was becoming explicit. Walsh was no longer pretending that employee welfare was his primary concern. He was openly acknowledging that Jennifer's knowledge made her a security risk that needed to be managed. "I'll certainly monitor the situation and provide appropriate support when Jennifer returns to work," Megan replied carefully. "Actually, I think we should make contact today. Verify her welfare. Ensure she doesn't need company assistance with whatever family emergency she's experiencing." Walsh's suggestion carried the weight of operational necessity rather than corporate kindness. Megan realized that Jennifer's safety depended entirely on maintaining the fiction that her location and activities were unknown to the people trying to find her. "I can attempt to reach her through normal HR channels, but if she's dealing with a genuine family crisis, excessive contact from the company might be inappropriate. Try anyway. And Megan?" Walsh paused at her doorway. "If you do reach Jennifer, please encourage her to contact me directly. Security protocols, you understand." After Walsh left, Megan sat quietly in her office, processing the tactical situation. Foreign operatives had infiltrated Mason Financial Group with the assistance of key corporate personnel. David Torres had been professionally eliminated for discovering their presence. Jennifer Chun was being actively hunted because she had witnessed their operations. And Megan Gray was the only person standing between innocent employees and hostile actors who operated without regard for civilian safety. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from David. "Safe house compromised, moving to secondary location. Hostiles have professional surveillance assets." The endgame was approaching faster than anyone had anticipated. David was being actively pursued. Jennifer was hiding under protocols designed for witness protection, and Megan was maintaining her cover while preparing for operations that would reveal capabilities no HR manager should possess. Her office window provided a view of downtown Chicago, stretching toward Lake Michigan, a cityscape of normal people conducting normal business, while unaware that hostile foreign intelligence operations were unfolding in the corporate tower above them. By evening, everything would change. The quiet HR manager who handled employee complaints and policy questions would either successfully protect innocent people from professional threats, or she would join David and Jennifer as targets for elimination. The transformation was almost complete. Megan Gray was preparing to become someone her colleagues had never imagined, and her enemies were about to discover they had seriously underestimated. At 3:47 p.m., the fire alarm system at Mason Financial Group activated without warning. The piercing electronic tone echoed through all 36 floors, accompanied by automated announcements directing employees to evacuate through designated stairwells. To most of the building's occupants, it appeared to be either a routine drill or a minor technical malfunction. To Megan Gray, it was the opening move in an operation that would transform her corporate workplace into an active battlefield. She was reviewing employee evacuation procedures, genuine preparation disguised as routine HR tasks when the alarm triggered. But instead of joining the orderly exodus of confused office workers, Megan remained at her desk, monitoring building security feeds through access credentials that no HR manager should possess. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The evacuation wasn't random. Specific floors were being cleared in sequence, creating isolated zones where hostile operatives could move without civilian witnesses. The 32nd floor, where David Torres's former office contained archived security data, was evacuated first. The 28th floor, housing IT infrastructure and network control systems, followed immediately. The pattern suggested professional level coordination designed to provide access to critical building systems. While maintaining plausible cover, her secure phone buzzed with an urgent message from David. Evacuation is hostile operation. They're using emergency protocols to access secured areas. I'm still inside building, hiding in sub-basement maintenance. David's situation was becoming critical. Professional operatives with building access were systematically eliminating evidence of their infiltration while creating opportunities for enhanced intelligence gathering. His knowledge of their activities made him a primary target, and his location in the building's lower levels meant he was trapped in an area where security cameras had limited coverage and emergency response would be delayed. Megan activated her emergency communication system, sending what appeared to be a routine facilities management email, but actually contained tactical coordinates and threat assessment data for her incoming support team. The message referenced maintenance scheduling and equipment placement, while actually providing building schematics, hostile actor positions, and extraction routes for endangered personnel. Through her office window, she could see Mason Financial Group employees gathering in the designated assembly areas across the street, checking their phones and chatting with colleagues about the unexpected interruption to their Friday afternoon. They appeared remarkably calm for people whose workplace was being systematically compromised by foreign intelligence operatives. A knock on her office door interrupted her surveillance activities. Megan, shouldn't you be evacuating with everyone else? Lisa Rodriguez, the chief legal counsel, stood in the doorway wearing the expression of someone trying to maintain professional composure during an obviously abnormal situation. I'm coordinating with building management to ensure all employees are accounted for. Megan replied smoothly, gesturing to her computer screen, showing what appeared to be employee roster spreadsheets. HR responsibility during emergency situations. Lisa entered the office and closed the door behind her. Megan, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. The statement carried an intensity that suggested Lisa had discovered information that changed her understanding of recent events at Mason Financial Group. Of course, Lisa. What's concerning you? Yesterday's meeting about David Torres. The whole situation felt orchestrated, like Webb and Walsh had predetermined outcomes rather than genuine policy concerns. Lisa's legal training had taught her to recognize procedural irregularities that might indicate underlying problems. Megan made a quick tactical decision. Lisa Rodriguez was intelligent, honest, and increasingly suspicious of the conspiracy she'd been unwittingly supporting. More importantly, She had access to corporate systems and legal authority that could be valuable for protecting innocent employees. Lisa, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen carefully and trust your instincts about whether I'm telling you the truth. Lisa nodded, her expression shifting to focused attention. Mason Financial Group has been infiltrated by hostile foreign operatives who are using key corporate personnel to conduct intelligence gathering and prepare for extraction operations. David Torres discovered evidence of systematic security breaches, which is why Webb and Walsh orchestrated his removal. Jennifer Chun witnessed operational planning sessions, which is why she's now under surveillance and in immediate danger. Lisa stared at Megan with the expression of someone whose worldview was being fundamentally challenged. That's an extraordinary accusation. Do you have evidence? Megan pulled David's security analysis from her locked drawer and spread the documents across her desk. 43 documented instances of coordinated unauthorized access, cross-referenced with employee schedules and building security protocols. The sophistication indicates professional-level infiltration. As Lisa reviewed the technical data, her legal mind processed the implications. If this is accurate, we're talking about potential violations of federal security laws, corporate espionage, and double quotes. She paused, reaching the logical conclusion. And whoever is involved would do anything to prevent exposure. Which brings us to our current situation, Megan continued. This evacuation isn't a safety drill. It's providing cover for the operatives to access secured areas and eliminate evidence of their activities. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted to alarm. Marcus Webb is asking for my location. He wants me to join him in the executive conference room on the 35th floor to coordinate legal responses to the emergency situation. Megan felt her tactical instincts engage completely. Webb was systematically gathering potential witnesses in isolated locations where they could be controlled or eliminated. Lisa's legal knowledge made her either a valuable asset for legitimizing hostile actions or a dangerous liability who needed to be neutralized. Lisa, I need you to make a choice that might save your life, Megan said with quiet intensity. You can respond to Webb's message and hope that his intentions are legitimate. Or you can trust me when I tell you that going to that conference room right now would be extremely dangerous. You're asking me to believe that Marcus Webb, our CFO, is working with foreign operatives. I'm asking you to consider why he's requesting your presence in an isolated location during what appears to be a security emergency, and why he coordinated David's removal immediately after security breaches were discovered. Lisa's legal training and personal instincts were clearly in conflict. Corporate loyalty and professional relationships argued for trust in Webb's instructions, while her growing understanding of the evidence suggested that trust might be fatal. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Webb. Lisa, need you in conference room immediately. Urgent legal consultation required. The urgency in his communications doesn't match the nature of a routine building evacuation, Megan observed. If this were a genuine emergency, legal consultation would be handled through established protocols, not isolated meetings in executive areas. Lisa made her decision. What do you need me to do? First, don't respond to Webb's messages directly. If pressed, say you're coordinating employee accountability with HR, and will join him as soon as that's completed. Megan handed Lisa a secure communication device. Second, use this to maintain contact with me regardless of what happens. And third, be prepared for the possibility that some of your colleagues aren't who you thought they were. The building's public address system crackled to life with a new announcement. Attention Mason Financial Group employees. Due to ongoing safety inspections, the building will remain closed until Monday morning. Please collect personal belongings from designated areas and proceed to final assembly points for dismissal. Megan recognized the announcement as operational camouflage. By extending the evacuation through the weekend, hostile operatives were creating a 48-hour window for unobserved access to building systems, data networks, and sensitive materials. Whatever extraction operation they were planning would occur during this extended closure. Her secure phone received an encrypted message. Perimeter surveillance confirms hostile vehicles positioning for extraction operations. Multiple foreign nationals with tactical equipment. Recommend immediate protective action for endangered assets. Sarah Mitchell's intelligence network had identified the scope of the threat. This wasn't simply corporate espionage, it was a coordinated extraction operation designed to remove valuable intelligence assets and eliminate witnesses who might compromise future operations. Lisa, the situation is escalating beyond what normal corporate security can handle, Megan said carefully. I'm going to reveal something about my background that will explain how I know what I know. But I need your word that this information stays between us. You have my word. Before joining Mason Financial Group, I served in military special operations. My specialty was protecting high-value assets in hostile environments and neutralizing threats to civilian populations. What's happening here falls directly within my area of expertise. Lisa's eyes widened as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. That's why you knew about secure communications, threat assessment, and operational planning. You're not really an HR manager. I'm exactly what this situation requires me to be, Megan replied. Right now, that means protecting innocent people from professionals who operate without regard for civilian casualties. Through her office window, Megan could see the last groups of Mason Financial employees being directed away from the building by personnel wearing building security uniforms. But her trained eye noticed details that civilians would miss. The security personnel were all unfamiliar faces. Their equipment was non-standard, and their positioning suggested tactical rather than administrative objectives. The building is being secured by hostile operatives, she told Lisa. David Torres is strapped in the sub-basement. Jennifer Chun is in protective custody at an off-site location, and we're about to become the only witnesses to whatever they're planning to extract from Mason Financial Group systems. Lisa processed this information with the methodical approach of someone whose legal career had taught her to evaluate evidence under pressure. Megan, if what you're telling me is true, we should contact federal authorities immediately. Federal response time in an urban environment is minimum 30 minutes for initial assessment, 60 to 90 minutes for tactical deployment, Megan replied automatically. We don't have that kind of time, and David Torres certainly doesn't have that kind of time. Her secure phone buzzed with another message. Tactical team ETA 20 minutes. Building is hardened against external assault. Recommend internal movement to secure extraction points. The cavalry was coming, but they would arrive to find a building controlled by hostile forces, with unknown numbers of operatives and sophisticated defensive positions. Successful extraction of endangered personnel would require coordination between external tactical teams and someone inside who understood both the building's layout and the operational capabilities of professional adversaries. Lisa, in about 20 minutes, this building is going to become very dangerous for anyone who isn't supposed to be here, Megan said quietly. I can get you out safely, but I need to reach David Torres first. He's the only person who can provide intelligence on exactly what these operatives are trying to extract from our systems. You're talking about conducting some kind of rescue operation, Lisa said, her voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. I'm talking about doing what's necessary to protect innocent people when conventional systems have failed, Megan corrected. It's what I was trained to do, and right now, it's what the situation requires. The transformation was nearly complete. The quiet HR manager who had spent a week navigating corporate politics and employee complaints was preparing to become someone her colleagues had never imagined and her enemies were about to discover. They had seriously underestimated the real test was about to begin. Megan Gray, moved through the service corridors of Mason Financial Group like liquid shadow. Her sensible HR heels replaced by tactical boots, retrieved from an emergency kit, hidden in her office filing cabinet. The transformation was complete. Blazer exchanged for lightweight body armor, ID badge supplemented by night vision equipment, and clipboard replaced by weapons that no corporate employee should possess. Lisa Rodriguez followed closely behind, struggling to process how thoroughly she had misjudged the quiet woman she'd worked alongside for 2 years. "How is this possible?" Lisa whispered as they navigated maintenance tunnels that most building occupants didn't know existed. "How does an HR manager have access to military equipment and detailed building schematics?" "Because an HR manager doesn't," Megan replied quietly, pausing at a junction to check for hostile surveillance. "But a former special operations specialist, who spent 6 months learning every inch of this building's infrastructure before accepting employment here does." The revelation recontextualized everything about Megan's behavior since joining Mason Financial Group, her meticulous attention to emergency procedures, her unusual knowledge of building security systems, her ability to remain calm under pressure, all the qualities that had made her an effective HR manager were actually manifestations of military training adapted to corporate environments. "You've been undercover for 2 years?" Lisa asked as they descended toward the sub-basement levels where David Torres was hiding. "Not undercover," Megan corrected, checking her tactical communication device for updates on hostile positions. "Transitioning. When you leave special operations, you don't simply forget how to assess threats and protect people. You find new environments where those skills can be useful." Through her earpiece, Megan received an encrypted status update. Perimeter secured by hostiles. Building access controlled. Internal movement detected on floors 28 to 35. Primary extraction target location confirmed. David Torres was still alive and communicating, but hostile operatives were systematically searching the building's lower levels. Time was becoming critical, not just for David's survival, but for preventing whatever intelligence extraction the foreign operatives were conducting on the upper floors. They reached the sub-basement level where David had taken refuge among the building's mechanical systems. The space was a maze of heating ducts, electrical conduits, and water pipes that provided excellent concealment, but limited escape routes. Megan's tactical training allowed her to navigate the confined spaces efficiently, while Lisa struggled with the transition from corporate conference rooms to industrial infrastructure. "David?" Megan called softly, using a frequency that would be audible to someone hiding nearby but wouldn't carry to potential hostiles in adjacent areas. "Here." David's voice emerged from behind a large electrical panel, followed by his emergence from the concealment space that demonstrated remarkable improvisation skills. His appearance suggested someone who had been hiding under stress for hours. Clothes disheveled, face showing fatigue, but eyes alert and focused. "David, we need to move immediately," Megan said, conducting a quick assessment of his physical condition. "Hostile operatives are conducting systematic searches, and this area will be compromised within minutes." "Megan, how are you accessing?" "Secure communications and moving through restricted areas like you know exactly where you're going." David's technical background had taught him to notice operational capabilities that didn't match official job descriptions. "Because I do know exactly where I'm going, and my background includes skills that transfer between different types of operations," she replied diplomatically. "Right now, what matters is getting you out of this building alive." Lisa Rodriguez was processing the implications of everything she was witnessing. "David, what exactly did you discover that made these people willing to kill to keep it secret?" David pulled out a waterproof storage device containing copies of his security analysis. Mason Financial Group isn't just being used for intelligence gathering. It's being used as a front for money laundering operations that fund international terrorism. The building access patterns I identified were foreign operatives coordinating financial transfers that bypass federal monitoring systems. The scope of the conspiracy was larger than anyone had realized. Mason Financial Group's legitimate financial services were providing cover for transactions that supported hostile foreign operations. David's security analysis hadn't just identified corporate espionage. It had exposed a sophisticated, money laundering network with national security implications. That's why Webb and Walsh were so desperate to silence your investigation, Megan said, understanding the tactical picture completely. You discovered evidence that could expose not just individual operatives, but an entire financial network. Her tactical communication device buzzed with an urgent update. Hostile forces converging on sub-basement levels. Multiple armed personnel with professional equipment. Extraction window closing rapidly. We need to move now, Megan said, shifting into full operational mode. Lisa, you and David are going to follow my instructions exactly. No questions, no hesitation, complete compliance. Your lives depend on it. The transition from collaborative discussion to tactical command was seamless. Megan's voice carried the authority of someone who had made life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure, and both Lisa and David responded automatically to the change in her demeanor. She led them through a service route that bypassed the main sub-basement corridors, using maintenance access points that provided concealment while moving toward emergency exits that most building occupants didn't know existed. Her movements were precise, economical, informed by detailed knowledge of the building's layout and tactical understanding of how professional operatives would conduct search operations. How do you know about these passages? Lisa whispered as they navigated a particularly narrow maintenance corridor. Because when you're responsible for protecting people in hostile environments, you learn every possible escape route before you need them, Megan replied. Standard operational preparation. They were approaching the building's emergency mechanical room when Megan's earpiece crackled with hostile communications that her equipment was intercepting and translating automatically. Foreign operatives were coordinating a systematic sweep of the sub-basement, using professional search techniques that left no hiding places unchecked. Contact in 30 seconds, she informed David and Lisa. When we encounter hostiles, you follow my lead without question. Stay behind me, move when I move, stop when I stop. Lisa was struggling to process the reality that her Friday afternoon had evolved from routine corporate activities to hiding from armed foreign operatives in building maintenance areas. Megan, this can't be happening. This is downtown Chicago, not some international conflict zone. Conflict zones are wherever hostile actors choose to operate, Megan replied matter-of-factly. Geography doesn't provide protection from people who don't respect civilian boundaries. They reached the emergency mechanical room, which provided access to external building systems and communication equipment that could contact Megan's support team. But as they approached the entrance, tactical indicators suggested the area was already under surveillance. Megan activated her secure communication system, sending coordinates and status updates to Sarah Mitchell's tactical team. Package located and secured. Hostile forces in immediate vicinity. Require extraction support for 3 civilians. The response was immediate. Tactical team in position. External access blocked by hostiles. Recommend internal route to rooftop extraction point. Rooftop extraction meant climbing 36 floors through emergency stairwells while avoiding professional operatives who controlled building access points. It was tactically complex, physically demanding, and required maintaining stealth while moving through areas where concealment was limited. Change of plans, Megan told David and Lisa. We're going up instead of out. David's technical mind immediately grasped the implications. 36 floors through emergency stairs while avoiding armed operatives. That's not evacuation, that's running a gauntlet. That's why people like me exist, Megan replied simply. To make impossible extractions possible when conventional options have failed. She led them to a service elevator that most building occupants didn't know existed. freight system used for maintenance equipment that operated independently of the main elevator network. Her access credentials allowed her to override normal operational restrictions, bringing the elevator to their level without alerting building security systems. This elevator has independent power and communication systems, she explained as they entered the cramped space filled with mechanical equipment. It can reach the roof level without passing through floors controlled by hostile operatives. As the elevator began its ascent, Lisa finally asked the question that had been building since Megan's transformation began. Who are you really? Because you're definitely not just someone who transferred skills from military service to corporate HR. Megan considered how much to reveal while maintaining operational security. I'm someone who spent 8 years conducting classified operations in environments where failure meant innocent people died. When I transitioned to civilian life, I chose positions where those skills could still be useful for protecting people, even if the threats were different. But you knew this was going to happen, David said, understanding dawning. You didn't just happen to have tactical equipment and secure communications. You've been preparing for this kind of situation. I've been preparing for the possibility that threats might require responses beyond what normal corporate security could provide, Megan corrected. When you understand how hostile operatives think and operate, you prepare for scenarios that other people hope will never occur. The elevator reached the 34th floor, just 2 levels below the roof access point where Sarah Mitchell's tactical team could provide extraction. But Megan's communication device indicated that hostile forces had identified their movement and were repositioning to intercept them at the roof level. New problem, she announced calmly. Our extraction point is compromised. Hostiles are moving to prevent rooftop access. Lisa felt panic beginning to override her professional composure. What does that mean for us? It means we adapt, Megan replied with the kind of steady confidence that came from years of experience with tactical problems that required creative solutions. It means we use skills and resources that our adversaries don't expect an HR manager to possess. The elevator stopped at the 34th floor, and Megan led them into Mason Financial Group's executive offices, the same corporate environment where Webb and Walsh had conducted their conspiracy, now transformed into the final battleground between professional operatives and a woman who had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The quiet HR manager, who had organized birthday parties and handled employee complaints, was about to demonstrate capabilities that would shock her colleagues and surprise adversaries who had seriously underestimated what they were dealing with. The real confrontation was about to begin. The executive floor of Mason Financial Group had been transformed into a command center that bore no resemblance to its daytime function as corporate headquarters. Computer terminals displayed data streams in multiple languages, sophisticated communication equipment filled conference rooms, and tactical maps covered mahogany tables that normally hosted board meetings. Marcus Webb stood at the center of it all, no longer maintaining his facade as a concerned CFO, but revealed as the operational commander of a foreign intelligence network that had spent months infiltrating American financial institutions. Megan Gray observed this transformation through the building's internal surveillance system, which her override codes allowed her to access without detection. The executive floor wasn't just being used for intelligence gathering, it was serving as a coordination hub for multiple simultaneous operations targeting financial institutions across the eastern United States. They're not just extracting data from Mason Financial, she told David and Lisa as they took concealment in a server room adjacent to the executive offices. They're using our building as mission control for attacks on other targets. David studied the surveillance feeds on Megan's tactical display. Those communication arrays aren't standard corporate equipment, that's military-grade intelligence gathering technology. Which explains why they were willing to kill to protect their operation, Lisa said, finally grasping the full scope of what they had stumbled into. This isn't corporate espionage. It's coordinated economic warfare. Megan's secure communication device buzzed with an update from Sarah Mitchell's tactical team. Building perimeter secured by hostiles. Rooftop access blocked. Alternative extraction. Requires neutralizing command center and creating tactical diversion. The message was clear: rescue would require eliminating the foreign operatives' ability to coordinate defensive operations. As long as Webb's command center remained functional, his people could prevent external tactical teams from reaching endangered personnel inside the building. Sarah's team can't extract us while the hostiles maintain operational control of the building, Megan explained to David and Lisa. Which means we need to disrupt their command structure from the inside. Lisa stared at her with the expression of someone whose understanding of reality had been fundamentally altered in the space of 2 hours. You're talking about attacking professional operatives with military equipment. That's not rescue, that's assault. That's asymmetric warfare, Megan corrected. When conventional approaches fail, you use unconventional methods that exploit your adversary's assumptions about your capabilities. She pulled up building schematics on her tactical display, highlighting structural vulnerabilities and system access points that most people would never notice. Webb's people are operating under the assumption that they're dealing with corporate security responses and local law enforcement. They're not prepared for tactical countermeasures from someone with specialized training. David's cybersecurity background helped him understand the strategic implications. You're saying they're operational. Planning doesn't account for internal resistance from someone with your skill set. Exactly. They dismissed me as a harmless HR manager, which means they've left vulnerabilities exposed that they would have secured against known threats. Megan indicated critical points on the building schematic. Emergency power systems, communication, networks, climate control, all accessible from internal maintenance positions that they're not monitoring because they don't expect internal opposition. Through the surveillance system, they could see Webb coordinating with subordinates who were clearly military professionals rather than corporate employees. The conversation was in Russian, but Megan's earpiece provided real-time translation of tactical discussions about asset extraction timelines and witness elimination protocols. They're planning to kill everyone who knows about their operation, she told David and Lisa matter-of-factly. Jennifer Chun, who's currently in protective custody. David Torres, who discovered their infiltration. Lisa Rodriguez, who has legal knowledge of their activities. And Megan Gray, who has proven to be more capable than they anticipated. The Stark assessment eliminated any remaining illusions about peaceful resolution or negotiated outcomes. This was a kill-or-be-killed situation where survival depended entirely on tactical superiority and operational initiative. What do you need us to do? Lisa asked, her legal training helping her focus on practical solutions rather than emotional responses to mortal danger. Megan appreciated the question. It demonstrated that Lisa understood they were now operating in an environment where normal rules didn't apply. David, you're going to access the building's climate control systems and create environmental chaos that disrupts their electronic equipment. Lisa, you're going to use your legal access codes to trigger emergency protocols that will confuse their operational timeline. And what are you going to do? David asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. I'm going to neutralize their command structure using methods that will remind them why underestimating opponents based on job titles is a fatal tactical error. Megan retrieved additional equipment from concealed storage locations throughout the server room, items that had been strategically positioned during her 2 years at Mason Financial Group. Night vision goggles, communications jammers, tactical explosives disguised as office equipment, and weapons that belonged in special operations rather than corporate environments. How long have you been preparing for this? Lisa asked, watching Megan assemble tactical gear with the efficiency of someone who had performed the same actions hundreds of times. "Since my second week on the job," Megan replied honestly. "When you've operated in hostile environments, you learn to prepare for worst-case scenarios, even when they seem unlikely, especially when they seem unlikely." David was accessing the building's environmental systems through maintenance terminals that his IT credentials allowed him to control. "Climate control is responding. I can create temperature fluctuations that will stress their electronic equipment and force them to divert resources to environmental management." Lisa was using her legal access to activate emergency notification systems that would create confusion and false information about law enforcement response times. Emergency protocols are active. Their intelligence about police response will be compromised. Through the surveillance system, Megan could see the effects of their sabotage beginning to impact Webb's operations. Tactical displays were flickering. Due to environmental stress, communication equipment was experiencing interference, and false emergency notifications were forcing hostile operatives to redirect personnel to address threats that didn't exist. "Phase 1 is creating tactical confusion," she explained. "Phase 2 is exploiting that confusion to neutralize specific threats. Phase 3 is creating extraction opportunities for external tactical teams." Her secure communication device indicated that Sarah Mitchell's team was monitoring the building's status and preparing to exploit whatever opportunities Megan's internal operations might create. The coordination between internal disruption and external tactical support was textbook special operations methodology. "Megan, there's something you need to see," David said, pointing to surveillance feeds from the building's lower levels. "They're not just conducting intelligence operations. They're placing explosive charges throughout the building's structural supports." The tactical picture became clear with horrifying precision. Webb's operatives weren't planning to simply extract intelligence and eliminate witnesses. They were preparing to destroy the entire building to eliminate evidence of their activities. The Mason Financial Group Tower, with its 36 floors of office workers who would return Monday morning, was being rigged for demolition. "How many people work in this building?" Megan asked Lisa, though she was already calculating tactical responses to a threat that had escalated beyond individual survival to mass casualty prevention. "About 4,000 employees across all floors, plus daily visitors and building services personnel," Lisa replied. Understanding the implications immediately, Megan's tactical assessment shifted from personal protection to catastrophic prevention. Webb's operatives were prepared to commit mass murder to protect their intelligence network, which meant stopping them had become a matter of national security rather than simply personal survival. "New mission parameters," she announced to David and Lisa. "We're not just extracting ourselves. We're preventing the destruction of a building that houses critical financial infrastructure and would kill thousands of people if it collapsed in downtown Chicago." The scope of responsibility was staggering, but Megan's training had prepared her for exactly this kind of escalation. When tactical situations spiraled beyond original parameters, successful operators adapted their mission objectives to match the threat level they actually faced rather than the threat level they had anticipated. "What does that mean for our chances of survival?" David asked with the practical focus of someone whose technical background helped him understand systemic failures. "It means we stop thinking about survival and start thinking about mission success," Megan replied with the calm certainty of someone who had made peace with operational sacrifice years earlier. "Some objectives are more important than individual outcomes." Through the surveillance system, they could see Webb's operatives moving with increased urgency, clearly aware that their operation was experiencing unexpected resistance. But their responses suggested they were still operating under the assumption that corporate security or local law enforcement was responsible for the disruption. They had no idea that a former special operations specialist was systematically dismantling their tactical advantages while preparing countermeasures that would exploit every assumption they had made about American corporate vulnerability. The final phase was about to begin, and Marcus Webb was about to discover that the quiet HR manager he had dismissed as irrelevant was the most dangerous opponent he had ever underestimated. The transformation was complete. Megan Gray was no longer pretending to be someone else. She was exactly who the situation required her to be. At 6:23 p.m., the lights went out across Mason Financial Group's executive floor. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows through corridors, where Marcus Webb's operatives had been coordinating what they believed was a flawless intelligence extraction. But the darkness wasn't caused by system failure. It was Megan Gray announcing that the quiet HR manager they had dismissed was about to demonstrate exactly why special operations specialists were never truly retired. Climate control is destabilized. Emergency power is intermittent, and their communication systems are experiencing cascading failures. David Torres reported from his position at the building's central server hub. His IT expertise had proven invaluable for creating technical chaos that disrupted professional military operations with corporate sabotage techniques. Lisa Rodriguez was monitoring legal and administrative systems from her concealed position, using her access codes to trigger false emergency notifications that confused hostile response protocols. Building management systems are reporting multiple structural failures. Fire department response has been delayed by false alarm protocols, and their intelligence about law enforcement positioning is completely compromised. Through her night vision equipment, Megan observed Webb's operatives struggling to adapt to environmental conditions they hadn't anticipated. Professional soldiers trained for overseas operations found themselves disoriented by familiar corporate environments that had become tactically unpredictable. They're operating under the assumption that American corporate facilities are soft targets with predictable vulnerabilities, she explained to David and Lisa through her tactical communication system. They didn't prepare for facilities defended by people who understand both corporate systems and asymmetric warfare. Megan moved through the executive offices with the silent precision of someone who had spent years perfecting infiltration techniques in hostile territory. But instead of foreign compounds, she was navigating conference rooms and administrative areas that she knew better than any of Webb's operatives. Every corridor, every access point, every structural vulnerability was mapped in her tactical memory. Her first target was the communication center that Webb's team had established in the main conference room. Sophisticated intelligence equipment worth millions of dollars was coordinating attacks on financial institutions across multiple states. Equipment that required specific environmental conditions and technical expertise to operate effectively. Through the conference room's glass walls, she could see 3 operatives working frantically to restore communication links that kept failing due to David's systematic sabotage of the building's electronic infrastructure. They were professional soldiers, but they were operating in an environment where their expertise was being systematically undermined by tactics they hadn't anticipated. Megan activated tactical explosives that she had disguised as standard office equipment and positioned strategically throughout the building during her 2 years of employment. The devices were precisely calibrated to destroy electronic systems without causing structural damage that might endanger innocent civilians in adjacent buildings. The first explosion eliminated Webb's primary communication array in a flash of light and electromagnetic pulse that disabled every piece of electronic equipment within 50 feet. The operatives in the conference room found themselves suddenly isolated from their command structure, their coordination capabilities eliminated by someone they had never considered a threat. Communication hub neutralized, she reported to David and Lisa, moving to secondary objectives. Through the building's internal surveillance system, which her override codes allowed her to control despite attempts to block external access, Megan tracked Webb's response to the loss of his primary communication center. His remaining operatives were converging on the executive floor, abandoning their positions throughout the building to protect the operational command structure. They're consolidating forces around Webb's position, she informed her team. Which means the structural explosive charges they placed throughout the building are now unguarded. David understood the tactical opportunity immediately. If we can disable those charges while they're focused on protecting Webb, we prevent the building destruction regardless of what happens to us. Exactly, Megan confirmed. Lisa, I need you to guide David to the explosive placement points using building schematics. Your legal access codes can override security locks that would delay him. David, your technical expertise can identify and disable devices that I don't have time to reach. It was a division of labor that utilized each team member's unique capabilities, while maximizing their chances of preventing mass casualties. Lisa's administrative access provided navigation support. David's technical knowledge enabled explosive disposal, and Megan's tactical training focused on neutralizing the human threats. That coordinated the entire operation. What about you? Lisa asked, though her expression suggested she already understood Megan's intended role. I'm going to have a conversation with Marcus Webb about career transitions and the importance of not underestimating colleagues based on their job descriptions. Megan approached Webb's position through service corridors that bypassed the main executive areas where his remaining operatives had established defensive positions. Her route took her through maintenance areas, utility spaces, and administrative zones that professional soldiers wouldn't consider tactically relevant, but which someone with detailed building knowledge could exploit for tactical advantage. She emerged in Webb's private office, where the man she had known as Mason Financial Group's chief financial officer was coordinating final phases of an operation that would have funded international terrorism while destroying evidence through mass murder. He was speaking rapidly in Russian to subordinates who were clearly struggling to understand how their sophisticated operation was being dismantled by what appeared to be corporate sabotage. Marcus, Megan said quietly, her voice carrying calm authority that cut through his increasingly frantic communications. We need to talk. Webb spun around, his expression shifting from surprise to rage as he recognized the woman who had systematically destroyed months of operational planning. Megan Gray, the helpful HR manager who couldn't mind her own business. Actually, Marcus, the problem is that employee safety and corporate security are exactly my business, she replied conversationally. Which is why I took your operation personally when it started threatening innocent people. Webb's hand moved toward a weapon concealed beneath his corporate blazer, but Megan's training had taught her to anticipate hostile movements before they became threatening actions. Her response was swift, precise, and demonstrated capabilities that no HR manager should possess. I wouldn't recommend that approach, she said as Webb found himself suddenly disarmed and immobilized by tactical restraints that had appeared as if by magic. Corporate conflict resolution works much better when everyone remains calm and professional. Through the office windows, explosions throughout the building marked David's success in disabling the structural charges that would have killed thousands of innocent people. Each detonation was controlled, designed to destroy hostile equipment without endangering civilian populations. You have no idea what you've interfered with, Webb snarled, his corporate facade completely abandoned. This operation extends far beyond Mason Financial Group. Stopping us here won't prevent what's coming. Maybe not, Megan agreed calmly. But it will prevent you from funding what's coming, and it will provide federal authorities with intelligence about your network that they didn't have before. Her secure communication device crackled with Sarah Mitchell's voice. Building secured. Federal response teams inbound. All hostile operatives neutralized or in custody. Through the windows, Megan could see tactical vehicles surrounding the Mason Financial Group tower and federal agents establishing perimeter security. The building that had been transformed into foreign intelligence headquarters was being reclaimed by American authorities, who would spend months analyzing the intelligence. treasure trove that Webb's operatives had inadvertently preserved. "David, Lisa, what's your status?" she asked through her tactical communication system. "Structural charges neutralized," David reported. "Building is secure for civilian reoccupation." "Legal documentation completed," Lisa added. "Every action we took is properly authorized under federal emergency protocols." As federal agents began securing the executive floor, Megan reflected on the transformation that had occurred over the past week. The quiet HR manager who had handled employee complaints and policy questions had protected thousands of innocent people from threats they never knew existed. Marcus Webb was led away in restraints that looked remarkably similar to the corporate ID lanyards that had once identified him as a trusted corporate executive. His operatives, revealed as foreign military personnel conducting hostile operations on American soil, would spend years in federal custody, providing intelligence about networks that extended far beyond Chicago. David Torres was reinstated too. His IT security position with expanded authority and recognition that his threat assessment capabilities had prevented catastrophic attacks on critical infrastructure. His systematic analysis had identified vulnerabilities that might have remained hidden until hostile actors exploited them for far more devastating purposes. Jennifer Chun returned to work the following Monday with no knowledge of how close she had come to being eliminated for accidentally witnessing foreign intelligence operations. Her safety had been preserved by people who understood that protecting innocent civilians sometimes required extraordinary measures by individuals with extraordinary capabilities. Lisa Rodriguez found herself appointed to a new position coordinating corporate security policies with federal authorities, ensuring that private sector institutions could recognize and respond to sophisticated threats that traditional corporate security wasn't designed to handle. And Megan Gray returned to her HR office, where she continued organizing birthday parties and handling employee complaints, while maintaining equipment and communication systems that most corporate employees would never need. The quiet woman who smiled pleasantly and asked about weekend plans was also someone who had prevented international terrorism while protecting colleagues who never knew they had been in danger. 6 months later, Marcus Webb's conspiracy trials would reveal the scope of financial networks that had been funding hostile operations across multiple continents. The intelligence gathered from Mason Financial Group would lead to the disruption of dozens of similar operations and the prevention of attacks that could have killed thousands of American civilians, but to most Mason Financial Group employees, the previous October's building emergency had been a minor inconvenience that resulted in improved security protocols and better emergency procedures. They returned to their normal routines, unaware that their lives had been saved by the woman who handled their vacation requests and workplace complaints. Sometimes the most important protections are provided by people who are never recognized for their contributions. Sometimes the most dangerous threats are neutralized by individuals whose capabilities are hidden beneath professional roles that seem unremarkable. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person who has been preparing to protect them when conventional systems fail and extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary responses. Megan Gray had spent years being dismissed as just HR. When the moment came that tested whether quiet competence was more powerful than institutional authority, she had demonstrated that true expertise isn't about job titles or recognition. It's about knowledge, preparation, and the willingness to act when action is needed most. The ghost in the machine had struck back, and the machine was safer because of it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.